Have you ever met someone who says, "We didn't have Google, we had guts"? Someone who can fix a broken chair, rewind a cassette with a pencil, and still tell you exactly where they were the first time they heard a disco song. Let's talk about people who grew up in the 1970s. Because growing up in the 70s wasn't just about big hair and bell bottoms. It was about freedom. Real, outside the house, come home when the streetlights turn on freedom. If you grew up in the 1970s, your childhood didn't come with a charging cable. It came with scraped knees. You didn't text your friends. You knocked on their door. And if they weren't home, that was it. No tracking, no last seen online, just mystery. And somehow you survived. People who grew up in the 70s remember a world that felt slower, not boring, just slower. TV had maybe a few channels. If you missed your favorite show, too bad. You waited a whole week. No streaming, no rewatching, just patience, the kind that modern Wi Fi could never teach. Music was an event. You didn't shuffle through 10,000 songs. You saved your money, bought one vinyl record, and played it until the scratches became part of the rhythm. And when disco hit, oh, it hit. Living rooms turned into dance floors. Parents embarrassed children. Everyone survived. School projects didn't involve copy and paste, they involved actual cutting and pasting with glue, and sometimes glitter that never left your house again. But here's the interesting part. People who grew up in the 1970s became adults during massive change. They saw the world shift from analog to digital, from rotary phones to smartphones, from handwritten letters to instant video calls. Imagine learning to type on a typewriter and now being asked to remember 17 passwords with at least one capital letter, one number, one symbol, and your childhood pet's nickname. They didn't just adapt, they upgraded. And let's talk about playtime. Kids in the 70s didn't need a battery to have fun. A bicycle was freedom. A cardboard box was a spaceship. A stick? That was a sword, a fishing rod, or a magic wand, depending on the day. And safety rules? Let's just say helmets were optional. Seatbelts were suggestions. You drank water from the garden hose and lived to tell the story. It sounds wild now, but it built something strong. People who grew up in the 1970s tend to have this quiet resilience. They didn't have instant answers, so they figured things out. If the TV stopped working, someone hit it. If the radio didn't play clearly, you adjusted the antenna like you were solving a NASA mission. And socially, you couldn't hide behind a screen. If you had a crush, you actually had to talk to the person, face to face, with words and eye contact. Terrifying. But character building. Fashion was bold. Bright colors, patterns that looked like they lost a bet, platform shoes that could double as small furniture. But nobody cared. It was expressive. It was fearless. And let's not forget the family dinners. No phones at the table. Because there were no phones at the table. Just conversation. Sometimes awkward, sometimes loud, but real. Now here's the twist. People who grew up in the 70s are often the calmest people in a crisis today. Why? Because they've seen change. Big change. They've watched technology explode. They've seen trends come and go. They survived dial-up internet. They survived disco. They survived fashion decisions that should never resurface. So when something new shows up, AI, apps, updates, they might roll their eyes, but they'll learn it. Because deep down, they remember when the most advanced piece of technology in the house was a color television. There's something powerful about growing up before the world became loud and instant. You learned patience. You learned creativity. You learned how to be bored and how to turn boredom into adventure. And maybe that's the secret. People who grew up in the 1970s didn't just grow up in a different decade. They grew up in a bridge between worlds. They remember life before everything was recorded, before every mistake lived forever online, before every moment needed a filter. They had memories that only existed in stories, and that's kind of beautiful. So the next time someone says, "back in my day," don't roll your eyes too fast. Because back in their day built a generation that can navigate both a vinyl record and a touchscreen. A generation that knows how to wait, how to fix, how to adapt, and maybe, just maybe, how to live a little lighter in a world that's constantly buffering. And if you grew up in the 1970s, you didn't just grow up, you evolved.